Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by as always. I enjoyed speaking with BBC Newsday this morning about the situation in Kenya. I was quite forthright and some responses on social media. Macro thoughts, global markets in risk-on mode after the Fed showed a more guarded view on inflation. Nikkei hits 21-year peak, dollar lower on dovish Fed. But those minutes were before the release of the wage data that we saw last Friday. The market rally since Trump's election isn't big enough to crack the top 5 in presidential history, according to Bloomberg. Take a look. Wall Street hit fresh highs. Bitcoin, which was very close to hitting a new record this morning, crossed 5,000. Currently, where are we? 5,110. That's a record high. Bitcoin skeptic Bob Sinche sent this Bitcoin chart with a double top established yesterday, but we've just broken through that, so that double top idea is probably overwhelmed by this bullish move. And then look at this. This is the difference in yield between 2-year and 30-year US Treasuries. And what it tells us is the market is very skeptical of higher rates. And hence you've got that flattening trend that you see in that chart from Bloomberg Gadfly. Home thoughts. I like this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Mara Fairmont, which we've visited on numerous occasions, tweeted, "We are humbled to be Kenya's leading tented safari camp in 2017 during the World Travel Awards." Got a lot of footage I thought I'd share with you. There's a video. Fairmont Mara Safari Club Fairmont moments that we put together. Let me show you a photograph of the Lion King we saw just a few weeks ago. Another video putting together the whole property. A photograph of Buffalo Country. It is a place I love visiting, I must say. The sights and sounds of the Mara River. Fairmont Mara is perched on the Mara River, and part of its qualities is the sounds that come off that river, the hippos, all kinds of things. I'll put up a photograph of the situation that I'd taken, and that takes me to a bend in the river by V.S. Naipaul. Going home at night, it wasn't often that I was on the river at night. I never liked it. I never felt in control. In the darkness of river and forest, you could be sure only of what you could see. And even on a moonlit night, you couldn't see much. When you made a noise, dipped a paddle in the water, you heard yourself as though you were another person. The river and the forest were like presences and much more powerful than you. You felt unprotected, an intruder. You felt the land taking you back to something that was familiar, something you had known at some time but had forgotten or ignored, but which was always there. You felt the land taking you back to what was there 100 years ago, to what had been there always. And again, it was as Nasruddin had said when I asked him about visas and he said that banknotes were better. You can always get into those places. What is hard is to get out. That is a private fight. Everybody has to find his own way. And this is the welcoming committee when you arrive at the Fairmont Mara video. And finally, a tent tour with the general manager. Tents are quite lovely. Monumental canvas by Andy Warhol, inspired by Da Vinci's famous Last Supper, could go for $50 million. Warhol's 1986 work made a year before the pop artist's death, depicts the Last Supper 60 times in black and white. The huge grid, 32 feet wide, has 10 columns and 6 rows. Take a look. I actually saw the original Last Supper. There's a late 15th century mural painting by Leonardo da Vinci housed by the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan. It is one of the world's most recognizable paintings. When I visited Milan, we went and saw that. In Christchurch, New Zealand, church bells are rung to welcome bar-tailed godwits arriving after an 11,000-mile non-stop migration flight from Alaska. Think about that. Let's move on to political reflections. The Salmans do not tolerate any criticism whatsoever. The kingdom has become more repressive than in the past, said James Dorsey. It's a break with the era of King Abdullah, who often sought to forge consensus, he said. The Salmans do not tolerate any criticism whatsoever. You need a very firm hand to see this through without provoking chaos, said Ali Shibabi, who's close to the government and executive director of the Arabia Foundation in Washington. The country is going through a generational succession. The government is undertaking a Herculean effort to restructure the country amid low oil prices, and it's under attack by Shiite and Sunni jihadis and Iran. He says a search for consensus would be futile because the political spectrum between the conservatives and the liberals is so wide as to be impossible to reconcile. Saudi Arabia was never an open society, but it was never a kingdom of fear, said Jamal Khashoggi, a senior journalist and former government advisor, now living in self-imposed exile in the US. The wave of arrests is part of the closing down of space for freedom of expression. The tougher policies at home and abroad are intertwined in the Twitter hashtag blacklist launched by royal court advisor Saud al-Qahtani in August. He urged Saudis to name and shame people who took Qatar's side in the Gulf dispute. There'll be tough judgment and pursuit for every mercenary who gets blacklisted, he wrote. The hashtag has taken on a life of its own. Recent targets include a famous comedian who makes satirical YouTube videos and a female activist arrested years ago for driving. Khashoggi has also been attacked online, labelled a traitor and a mercenary. The media and the electronic army are being encouraged to go after those people, he said. It's very Orwellian. Look, it's a fiendishly complex pivot to pull off. And so much vim and vigour is being wasted on a sectarian cul-de-sac. Mariana Rajoy tweeted yesterday, I'll post the photograph, the opinion seems to be that he's got Catalonia boxed in, but let's see how things move from here. Xi's legacy may rest on the world's biggest infrastructure project, sometimes known as One Belt, One Road, or OBOR. It will attempt to integrate China's markets with those on 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa. The idea is to build an integrated rail network, crisscrossing Central and Southeast Asia and reaching far into Europe, while constructing large, modern deep-water ports to link shipping from China and the surrounding Western Pacific to South Asia, Kenya, Tanzania, and beyond. So far, more than 60 countries have signed up or appeared inclined to participate. Backed by Xi's personal prestige, heft on this scale has turned OBOR into a kind of organizing motif for China's politics and economy. The clear hope is that it will cement the country's place as a leading and perhaps someday soon the preeminent center of gravity in the world. My piece on the 28th of August was headlined China Rising. Trump calls Trudeau a great friend of mine. Vanity Fair says oftentimes for the Trumps, optics matter more than substance. North Korea says Trump lit the fuse of war. And then interesting piece in the AFP saying the ruling North Korea is a family business and Kim Jong-un's little sister has emerged as its most powerful woman. She is his little sister and chief image maker, has established herself as the most powerful woman in the nuclear-armed state's political hierarchy. Believed to be in her late 20s, making her the youngest member of the reshuffled Workers' Party's Politburo that was unveiled at the weekend. She is the only one of Kim Jong-un's siblings to hold an official title, and in a family tree complicated by their father Kim Jong-il's various marriages and partnerships, enjoys a special relationship with her brother, what they also share the same mother. She could be the one to take over from Kim in the event of his absence. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar trading higher, 118.62. Dollar index below 93, 92.83. Japanese yen, 112.26. Swiss franc, 0.9718. The pound, 132.46. The Australian dollar has been firm today. What is that? 0.7828. India rupee, 65.125. South Korean won, 1133.74. Brazilian real, 3.1712. Egyptian pound, 17.6493. And the rand, that's bounced, 13.4779. Dollar index, I'll put up a chart. I still think 93.50 is a key price pivot. Raf Kadian, who I follow on Twitter, posted this long-term chart and sort of shows us where he sees the breakout to the upside and the downside are. Euro dollar got as high as 118.80 as the ECB's taper is now on the horizon. That's JS Blockland. We're now at 118.61. I'm still bearish the euro, and I expect it to go and have a look at that level of 114.50. Commodity markets, gold 1296.42. It's come back strongly, coming back up to this 1300 level. That's an interesting move. WTI crude oil, let's take a look at that, $51.14. It can go as high as 55. If it breaks 47, 46.50, it's going right down. Take a pick. Let's move on to Sub-Saharan Africa. World Bank issued their Africa Pulse number 16, which is an Africa-wide report. The link's on Rich Wrap-Ups in case you want to look at it, following a sharp slowdown over the past 2 years. A recovery is underway in Sub-Saharan Africa. GDP growth in the region is expected to strengthen to 2.4% in 2017 from 1.3% in 2016, slightly below the pace previously projected. The rebound is being led by the region's largest economies. In the second quarter of 2017, Nigeria exited a first quarter recession, and South Africa emerged from 2 successive quarters of negative growth. Economic activity has also picked up in Angola. Elsewhere, an increase in mining output, along with a pickup in the agricultural sector, is boosting economic activity in metals exporters. GDP growth is stable in non-resource intensive countries supported by domestic demand, but the recovery is weak in several important dimensions, they say. Regional per capita output growth is forecast to be negative for the second consecutive year, while investment growth remains low and productivity growth is falling. Ethiopia is set to be the fastest growing economy in Sub-Saharan Africa this year and next, says the IMF. Lots of bullishness about their prospects. The IMF says that Zambia is now at high risk of debt distress. Quartz Africa is saying there's a strong chance a third of all people on Earth will be African by 2100. Macau Hub is reporting that Angola is set to return to economic growth in 2017, contracted 0.7% in 2016, but expected to return to 1.5% growth this year. And then an interesting piece in the African Business magazine, Angola's coming power struggle, talking about the 38-year rule of Jose Eduardo dos Santos being over. Peaceful handover of power by Africa's second longest serving president is significant, but the question is just how real a transfer it will be. Although Dos Santos takes his leave, the aging leader made sure to entrench his power base before departing. Lourenço inherits an office and a body politic that has been completely crafted in Dos Santos's image. And the conclusion is Dr. Gastrow concludes, at the moment everyone is holding their breath to see when a split between Lourenço and Dos Santos will happen. No Congo election until the mid of 2019, says the Electoral Commission. That's going to go down well with the opposition. Not. South African all shares up 14.05% and at a record. Dollar versus Rand. The Rand rebounded yesterday on a perception that the Fed was a little bit softer on inflation. Egyptian pounds at 17.6493. Nigerian all shares up 36.38% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is up 35.4% year to date. Kenya, the IEBC says that the election will happen as scheduled and will include all the 8 candidates unless one withdraws formally as per the law. Raila Odinga takes a gamble by threatening to boycott Kenya's election, says The Economist. It had already been clear for several weeks that Mr. Odinga did not plan to contest the election. His coalition of parties, NASA, had been running a bare-bones campaign. The candidate himself had made plans to travel to Britain and possibly America 2 weeks before the vote, prime campaigning time, presumably to drum up international support for his withdrawal. Yet the announcement still contained a surprise. This is because instead of proposing a straightforward boycott, Mr. Odinga seems to be hoping that by standing down, he will force the courts to halt the election altogether and order a new one in the future after the parties have nominated new candidates. Under the original Supreme Court ruling that annulled August's election, the Electoral Commission has until November the 1st to organize a new one. If that deadline is missed, then Kenya will be plunged into a constitutional crisis. It is unclear how that would be resolved. Those in the camp of the incumbent President, Mr. Kenyatta, want an election to be held no matter what. Some hardliners want him simply to be declared president. In Parliament, MPs pushed through an amendment to the electoral law that automatically awards victory to the remaining candidate if one of them withdraws from a rerun of the presidential election. By walking away, Mr. Odinga seems to be gambling on his ability to threaten chaos to push Mr. Kenyatta to negotiate. The trouble with that strategy is that Mr. Odinga is running out of money, and although protests occasionally gum up the centre of Nairobi, even his most partisan supporters will not stay on the streets indefinitely. The worst outcome for Mr. Odinga in Kenya is that this bluff is called and the election goes ahead without him. Mr. Kenyatta might remain president, but a large proportion of the population would not recognize his right to rule and would feel left out of the political system. The Nairobi all-share dropped 0.67% yesterday in its first reaction to the withdrawal news. Kenya's dollar-denominated 2024 sovereign bond fell as much as 1.2 cents. I said I expect the October 26th election to take place, and therefore we should start to see a recovery at the bourse, which is just looking for political closure. It's going to get some political closure, but not as neatly as it was hoping for. Raila Odinga, opposition leader, won the historic chance for election rerun, says not showing up. John Aglenby. My piece over the weekend touched on all these points that Daniel Nels has touched on. I said, politics is landing blows on the economy. I said, what is clear is that the advantage of incumbency, in fact, accelerates in this round 2 of the election. Therefore, I expect the opposition to boycott the election entirely, and that the strategy of tension will be maintained by degrading and denigrating the entire process. Market participants need to model this scenario because this is the direction of travel. In that piece, I said, I was talking about the stock exchange, but drawing a comparison to the economy, and talking about the day we had circuit breakers, and saying that, that day we all got a chance to look at what a cliff edge and cliff edge effects look like. Political crisis with no clear end grinds down economy. That's on Bloomberg. We have no business now, to be honest. Kenya's parliament passed this controversial election law amendment that we've discussed. The street was another hotbed of activity yesterday. My father, who's 81 years old, was in town. Got a bit worried about him. And it takes me back to Paul Virilio. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form, not in the place of production, but in the street, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine, and itself becomes a motor, a machine of attack, in other words, a producer of speed. I said this on the BBC as well. I said, what does it cost to put 500 people on the street? I venture $10 a head max, $5,000 versus an economic deterioration of at least 100x is an outstanding example of the efficacy of this asymmetric strategy. Let's go and compare the street protests in Togo, and you will note our street protests belong in the theatre. Kenya's 2024 dollar bond fell more than 1 cent as the political crisis deepened. Nairobi all-share closed at a 2-month low, but it's still up 19.83% year-to-date. NSE 20 closed at a 2.5-month low, but it's still up 14.39% year-to-date. Once again, I'm grateful you stopped by.